Good evening, YouTube. Here is just a little subtle foreshadowing of sometimes when you're woodworking, you crash out a little bit because no matter what you do, sometimes things just don't go your way and you take out your frustration on your lathe, which is not a smart thing to do. So that's just pretty much how this project's going to go. Trying to make a pen, and I've made plenty of pens before in the past. However, sometimes when I'm making these pens, they just don't go my way. And this was one of these pens. So initially we started out with a walnut blank. Obviously we got a tub full of blanks here. You know, I've made pens before in the past, and sometimes when you're woodworking or just working on the lathe, I'm sure everybody's kind of gone through this at some point, you know, you just have a project that just doesn't come together, and this is one of those projects. But we get everything done typically how we usually do, get everything measured, take the blank over to the miter saw, and get everything cut down to the proportions that we want. So this part's going pretty good. And then you come in and you drill a hole in the middle of it. And this part should have been my indicator that, you know, maybe this isn't going to go as smoothly as planned. So getting through the walnut wasn't really an issue. I had a little bit of resistance on this part, but for the mostly it went pretty smooth, a little close to the edge. So this is, I'm not even going to tell you what I did that made this so much more difficult than it had to be. So I get everything onto the lathe and we start turning, and things are going smooth, or at least I think they're going smooth. There's a little bit of wobble. I'm stopping it, tightening things up, just trying to get, you know, material worked off. And I forgot a crucial step when I set this up. And I had to start and stop the lathe, and then I realized I didn't put in the brass fittings into the blanks. And you can see there's the part of the wood blank that I worked on, and my dumb ass completely forgot to put in the actual guts of the pen, which I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't obviously thinking, and finally figured out, hey, maybe you should put those in there. So I put the insides and the internals in there, but I'm still unfortunately getting the same problem. And, you know, I've done enough pens to know if you press too hard or get everything too compressed, the wood will crack. And that's what I ended up doing, was just feeding it through, and things were starting to come apart. So I used a different chisel. I started and stopped it. I increased the RPM. I did everything that I remember to do for these projects, and just nothing was working. So between, you know, just forgetting to put in the internals of the pen, I just was so frustrated with it. I finally just, you know, kind of snapped a little bit. So I stop and start the lathe a couple of times, just, you know, take it down to one piece on the lathe, thinking that maybe that would help. And it starts spinning. I'm getting a little bit of the material worked off, but not everything entirely. And it just keeps doing that. And I finally just start hitting the damn thing with my chisel, and it like cracks. And I'm like, okay, screw it. I'll go on to the next piece. So, you know, I don't want to waste the entirety of the blank. So the other half, for some reason, worked really well. Everything got tightened down, and obviously I'm working down the material. And this part went smooth. I was like, okay, screw it. One part is completely ruined. I have one part left. So I'm like, okay, cool. Well, at least do something with it. So we get this part worked down, but obviously you need two parts, a top and a bottom portion of the pen. So we have to start over. So I end up going back into my box of blanks that you saw earlier in the video. And I just did the same thing, cut it down, and then put some internals into another portion of the pen. And now I'm just working down a completely different project. So that whole first half of this video, it's just a waste. But this is just kind of like the progression from one piece of wood into another piece of wood, one part of a project into another. So we're just working down material at this point, and just trying to learn from our mistakes. And part of the mistakes was the where the bushings are, they weren't flat, so they weren't attaching appropriately. So I think for future videos, and I've done probably by now almost 100 pens, I don't know why I just don't remember these basic fundamentals of pen turning that probably would have saved me a lot of headache in this video. But I learned from my mistakes, got everything nice flat on either end, did one piece at a time, and then end up just doing a completely different video. But sometimes you got to crash out. Sometimes when you're woodworking, I'll admit, I've never seen any other YouTuber kind of just crash out on their lathe. But me, I just keep it as real as possible. Some projects just don't go your way, and unfortunately, this was one of those projects, so a little bit of a crash out, but we learned from that first blink of what not to do, and learning what not to do sometimes is an important part of the learning process. So sanded everything down. We're going to get everything covered in oil and just really going to make that wood kind of pop. I don't know what kind of wood this is. I just grabbed something randomly out of my box, but you can see here, at least we have a pen. So now we can start the assembly portion here, and everything pretty much goes smoothly here. But just sometimes things just don't go your way, and that's just part of it. But once we got the pen assembled, it looks pretty cool. But I show failure on my channel because I'm not the greatest of woodworkers, but sometimes you just get aggravated. And don't do what I did earlier in the video. Don't hit your lathe while it's spinning. Just stop it and go do something different. But this is all the guts and everything left over. So hope you guys liked it. Hope you learned from it. And I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, peace.